we present Beowulf, an original adaptation, written and read for you by Jon Buckeridge. Part 8. The Work of Weland. The music swelled and flowed again and again. Around Beowulf the whole of Heorot was alive with the sound of it, the feel of it, as if the hall was a living creature and music was its heartbeat. Far from the browbeaten and crestfallen Danes he had met the night before, these people were alive and vibrant with dancing and joy. Even Unferth, who yesterday Beowulf would have sworn was intent on killing him, had thanked him profusely. "I beg your forgiveness for what I said last night in drink," the tall man asked. "I was not... This last 12 years, it has taken much," he finished lamely. "But you have returned to us our hope, and we are in your debt." Hope. That was it. He may not have liked Unferth, but the man certainly understood the feelings of his people. Hope was what had been missing when Beowulf and his Geats had arrived the day before. The Danes had been without hope for 12 long years, and now, with the death of Grendel, it had been returned to them. No wonder so many men, women, and children had sought him out to embrace him warmly. Though, he reflected, this was something of a mixed blessing. The wounds and bruises from his battle with the beast were now truly making themselves known, and being embraced by hundreds of burly, large Danes was enough to make him feel them all over again. It was a strange thing to be in the same hall where just hours before he had been locked in a deadly grapple with the monstrous Jotun, an experience that had tested him to his very core. Strange to know that this had been the site of a brutal murder of so many Danes and his own Geatland friend Gunnar. Now, though, it was as if some great lord or king was wedding, and all were summoned to the feast. Were it not for the great arm of Grendel, torn away by Beowulf himself and now nailed to the rafters above them, it would seem like all that death and violence had happened in some other place entirely. Beowulf's head hummed muzzily, and he couldn't decide whether it was from the fight or from the drink. A little of both, he concluded, and decided he would make every effort to tip the balance firmly in the direction of the drink. As he stumbled off in search of a refill, his thoughts were interrupted as the music ceased and a voice called out. "Pray silence, my friends," called the king's man, Ashera, a bright smile lighting up his narrow face. "For King Hrothgar would speak." A great cheer went up as the king ascended his throne. Despite his years, he seemed as light and giddy as a youth as he beamed out at his people and motioned them to silence. "My people," he called, "my friends, we are here to celebrate, for a great weight has been lifted from Daneland." Another great cheer went up, and around the hall mugs and horns of ale and wine and mead were lifted. No small amount was spilled, for the Danes had been celebrating for a good few hours already. Again the king motioned them to silence, and he went on, becoming more solemn. "But we did not lift this weight ourselves, no. It was lifted for us by our wondrous friend and cousin from Geatland. With his brave warriors, this man has stood as shield for us and struck the blow to free us from the curse of Grendel. My friends, I present to you Beowulf!" From outside, it might have seemed that a thunderclap went off in the hall as all of Daneland cheered for Beowulf and the Geats. "Beowulf! Beowulf! Beowulf!" they chanted, and Beowulf felt a wide, foolish grin paint his face as he blushed at the attention. Better to face 1,000 Jotun than a crowd of cheering onlookers. He felt a hand grab hold of his arm, and looking to his right he saw Axel lifting it high and calling on the Danes to cheer him harder. From his left, Ulf raised up the other arm, and then Beowulf let out an ungainly yelp as Leif joined in, and the three of them hoisted him into the air, parading him around the room as the cheers went on. Eventually, blushing crimson, Beowulf was lowered down, and King Hrothgar motioned the room to silence once again. "I am," he told the room, "a gift-giving king. Mine is the burden of asking others to do deeds on my behalf, and yet mine is the great joy of rewarding those deeds when they are done." He turned to Beowulf, and Beowulf saw the old king's eyes swam with tears. "Beowulf, today I call you son. O great and mighty warrior of Geatland, there is no gift that I can give that will ever repay what you have given to me, to all of us, to return our joy to us, to return our hall of Hierot, to return the heart of hope to our people. How can a man possibly repay such things?" He paused for a moment and pressed his knuckle to his mouth as tears fought for their freedom. "And yet, I shall do all I can," and he motioned to the back of the hall. Gasps went up as, led in by Ashera, came 8 of the most beautiful horses Beowulf had ever seen. They were large and powerful, yet not so large that they would be slow or cumbersome. Glossy, bright-eyed, and dapple-grey, they seemed like they could be coursers and war horses all at once, and Beowulf's breath was taken. On the lead horse, Beowulf saw a saddle of such fine craftsmanship that it could only have been made for a king. The leather was etched and carved with intricate patterns, and in bright gold was the king's own seal. Beowulf knew King Hrothgar was giving him his own saddle and tack, a gift usually passed from father to son, but now handed on to him. He looked up to the old king, who he had loved so much from his youth, and now it was not just Hrothgar's eyes that were swimming with tears. At Ashera's side came Unferth, bearing a great war standard woven with gold and intricately worked with a great design of a boar. Next to him walked a warrior with a battle helm and belt, both equally beautiful and marked with that same boar crest. Another man came in with a beautifully made sword, and still another man entered with a chest holding arm rings of gold and silver for Beowulf and each of his men. Finally there came another man, all dressed in black, and carrying a chest filled with silver. Everyone in the hall bowed their heads. All knew what this was. The Were-Guild, an offering for the family of Gunnar, Beowulf's friend who was slain by Grendel. In the silence that followed, Hrothgar spoke again. "All this I give to you, Beowulf, with joy in my heart," he told the hall, "and with it I ask you once again to take the love and kinship of all the Danes. We shall forever be in your debt, and you shall forever be a hero to our folk." He raised his cup high, and the whole hall copied his example, eyes locked on Beowulf, and they drank as one. Beowulf did not know what to say. He was a warrior, and had never been the most eloquent with words to begin with. With such a great outpouring of love, and a not inconsiderable outpouring of ale, he found himself entirely lost for words. He recalled the first time he had ever met the king, all those years ago, a small boy in a foreign land trying hard not to embarrass his parents, and he remembered what had got him through that moment as well. Clapping his sword hand to his chest, he bowed deeply. It seemed to be enough because the whole room cheered, and Hrothgar grinned broadly. "A man of few words, I see," the king jibed. "Well, no matter. I know a man of a great many words to reset the balance." And he called out the Skjald, who spellbound the room as he struck up with stories of the battles between the Finns and the Danes in times gone by. Beowulf could not quite focus, though, and it wasn't just because of the ale. Everything he had been through in the last day, it was all so much bigger than he had ever expected. The journey, the state of the Danes that he had found them, the battle, the death of Gunnar, and now this showering of riches and wealth. He suspected it would take some time for him to fully come to terms with everything that had happened here, and quite frankly, he was looking forward to a few days to rest so he could do just that. The bruises Grendel had given him, not to mention the ache of that broken rib, were really quite spectacular. A hand landed on his shoulder, and Beowulf looked round to see the smiling faces of Hrethik and Hrothmund, the king's sons, pressing a mug of mead into his hands and asking him to come and sit with them. Beowulf gratefully accepted and slumped down with the two, glad of the skjald skillfully holding the attention of the room. As the story came to an end and the crowd howled their gratitude for a tale well told, Beowulf thought the great gathering would finally come to a close. The drink was starting to have its effect on the room, and Beowulf could see many a reveller settling back into a corner, their eyes fighting a losing battle with their eyelids. At that moment, though, Ashura's voice broke out again. "My friends, pray silence for the queen," he called, and Waltheow entered the hall. Beowulf had not seen her in some time, and he had assumed she was just lost in the crowd, but now it seemed she had been absent with a purpose in mind. In her hands she held an ornate box, clutched tightly, and behind her came a man with a finely worked wooden chest. "Am I too late for the gift-giving?" she called to the king. "My dear woman," Hrothgar replied, "I have lived a great many years, and I have never come across a moment that is too late for the giving of gifts." He smiled at her, his eyes sparkling as they had when Beowulf had first met him, and motioned her to continue. "Beowulf," said the queen, "today I too call you son. You have done great service to my family, and I am more grateful than you can possibly know." She looked at Beowulf sitting between her two sons and smiled warmly. "These two boys of mine, your new brothers, shall carry the legacy of all Daneland when we are gone. Today I ask that you help guide and protect them, just as you have done for us." There was another note to her voice beyond the gratitude, the quiet and earnest desire of a mother seeking to ensure her children will be kept safe and protected. Beowulf thought of his own mother, how no matter his size or his strength, she still doted over him as if he were that self-same babe she had born into the world, and he thought he understood. Looking up at Waltheow, he nodded slowly, and she nodded back in response. "As a symbol of the connection between the Geats and the Danes, I offer you this gift, Beowulf." And she opened the box in her hand to reveal a beautiful golden torque, fashioned like a plaited cord and set about with polished jewels. There was another gasp in the room at the sheer beauty of the gift, and again Beowulf found himself speechless, but Waltheow went on. "And to make sure you may always stand to protect your new brothers, I give you this." She motioned to the man behind her, who opened up the chest to hold up a coat of ringed mail. But this was not just any ringed mail, this was something wondrous. If Heorot was the finest hall that Beowulf had ever seen, the true pinnacle and perfection of the craft, this was the finest mail coat he had ever seen, the true pinnacle and perfection of the craft. It was so intricate and finely worked it seemed almost like it was one shimmering sheet of steel instead of so many rings all linked together. "This," the queen went on, "is an heirloom of my house and the work of the master smith, Weland. I give it to you, Beowulf. May it be a great protection for a great protector." If he had thought himself speechless before, now he truly was. The work of Weland was quite literally the stuff of legends, and seeing it here he could understand why. Before he realized his legs had carried him, he was standing in front of the queen and bowing deeply. She, in turn, swept down from the high seat and wrapped him in the warm embrace that only a mother can give. The music struck up again, but it was not for a great while longer. It seemed at last that the celebration was indeed coming to a close. Those who were already propped up around the edges of the hall were now deep into sleep, and a great many others were seeking to join them. Gradually the hall quieted, and at last the only sounds were the crackle of the fire and the deep snores of the contented Danes. As his own eyes closed, Beowulf felt glad to have been able to save this great hall of Heorot for these people, and to return to them evenings of peace and joy and merriment like this one. But Waltheow was not the only mother at work in Daneland that night. Deep in the darkness, another mother stalked the night. She smelled the scent of spilled blood, the spilled blood of her son, and malice burned within her. Following the trail his broken body had wrought, Grendel's mother set out into the night with a single thought burned into her mind: vengeance. Thanks for listening. Beowulf was a Settle Stories commission written and read for you by Jon Buckeridge. Story editor was Miriam Sarin. Intro music was Warrior by Hartsman. Outro music was Travel in the Ocean by Monument Music. It was a Parable Arts production.